Hi, I'm Joe Saunders with Miniature Landscape Hobbies. In this episode, we're going to talk all about a product that's absolutely essential for miniature wargaming: movement trays. And most importantly, we're going to cover a cheap and easy way to make your own that comes out to be basically free, so you can save your money to get those all-important models. Let's get to it. Miniature Landscape Hobbies is proudly supported by these sponsors. Movement trays are probably one of the great unsung heroes of historical miniature gaming. This is because, for historical gaming, model counts can often be quite high. And when it comes to the game itself, nothing slows things down quite as much as having to move each miniature one at a time. So, for this reason, we can use movement trays. If I want to move this unit of 10 Imperial Guardsmen, all I have to do is grab the tray. Otherwise, my opponent would have to wait ages while I move each model one at a time. Then after they're moved, well, I have to rank them back up again. And this can create a real issue. You don't want your opponent to fall asleep during your movement phase. And everybody, I think, wants to get their games done in a reasonable amount of time. Now, not every miniature wargamer is going to need movement trays. A lot of model systems, especially the skirmish-based ones, allow you to actually play with a very limited number of models, and so they're okay to move around individually. Also, some other systems mount multiple models on one base, so you don't have a lot of separate bases to move around. Black Powder often mounts miniatures in groups of 4, so when you're moving a squad of 24 models, all you need to do is move a couple bases rather than all sorts of models individually. However, if you're like me and you like to adapt your miniatures for every type of wargaming, whether it be skirmishing or for larger count games, you're going to need some solution for mounting your models in groups. This is, of course, especially important in games where you have units that deploy in firing lines. Over the years, plenty of manufacturers have come up with lots of different options for movement trays. There's pre-made plastic ones, and also ones made of MDF. You can buy these from various stores, and in my case, you can even get them customized with your own logo on it. Obviously, as an option, these movement trays would work well, and there's a wide variety of sizes that'll fit any number of different types of models. You do, of course, have to think ahead of time to make sure that there's enough space for all your models to fit. This pre-made base will fit one rank of cavalry, but not two. And since usually I deploy my cavalry 2 lines deep, well, this one just isn't going to work. An easy solution to get around this is to just make them yourself. With a lot of online CAD programs, such as Tinkercad being free to use and really easy to operate, you can just make your own movement trays if you have access to a 3D printer. I do this all the time, and because I have the right format for my logo, I just print my own logo straight into the surface of my movement trays. By the way, if you join my Patreon, you can get access to these 3D print files for free. And who doesn't want to have my logo on their movement trays? The problem with pre-bought and also 3D printed movement trays is that it costs money. And this gets in the way of doing things like buying more models. And let's face it, who doesn't want to have as many models to paint and play with as possible? This only leaves one other option: homemade movement trays. And I must say, these are fairly easy to make. Recently, I've been on a kick producing a lot of Napoleonic miniatures. As a result, I've been producing a lot of my own homemade movement trays so they can fit my units just exactly how I like them. In this video, I'm going to show you my method for building movement trays that is very effective, produces a durable tray that works great, but also costs practically nothing. Let's get into it.
I'd like to take a quick moment to thank my Patreon supporters. Without their assistance, miniature landscape hobbies would not be possible. If you would like to learn more about the benefits of becoming a Patreon supporter, please check the link in the video description.
The tools you need for this project are pretty common and really are nothing special. The first thing you need is a cutting mat. It would also be helpful to have a sheet of 100 grit sandpaper and some super glue. I always suggest you get this type of super glue with a bonding accelerant. It just makes your life a lot easier. You also need a craft knife with a fresh blade and a rattle can of spray paint that comes in a color that you like for your bases. It's also a pretty good idea to use a matte varnish. Finally, you'll want a pair of pliers with fairly wide jaws, a metal ruler, and a pen or pencil. The materials you need to make the movement trays themselves can be purchased at the dollar store. I use these 2mm thick balsa wood sheets and these 5mm thick balsa wood planks. They only run a couple dollars a package, and they work really well.
To begin the build, you need to consider two things ahead of time. First is the dimensions of the bases of the models you're building the tray for, and second is how many models you're going to put in the tray. In this example, I'm working on building a tray for 6 cavalry bases that are all side by side in a single rank. The bases are 25mm wide by 50mm deep. So now I grab the 5mm thick planks and measure enough room for the bases. Altogether, these bases would be 150mm wide by 50mm deep, but we need rails to hold the models on and room for air. So to account for this, I set the plank up to be 160mm wide by 60mm deep, transferring the measurements onto the wood itself with a pen or pencil. Something to consider here is that you'll likely be making lots of these, so you can always take a completed example, if you have one, and trace its dimensions to make the stage even easier. Then I cut the plank to size with a sharp knife and a metal ruler. I score the lines deeply on both sides of the plank. When the lines are deep enough, I snap the excess off with my pliers and follow up by sanding the edges smooth. Now we need the rails around the edges of the tray. I choose to put rails on all sides, but a lot of builders will leave the back edge open. This is up to you, of course. Because my trays are 1 centimeter wider and deeper than they need to be in order to fit the bases, I cut the rails at the front and back to be 3mm wide out of the 2mm thick balsa sheet. When you do this, cut in the direction of the wood grain. That way you get the most precise cuts and you won't get any chunks taken out when you're cutting in the wrong direction on the grain itself. I now super glue the rails onto the planks, checking to make sure they're flush with the edges. This is set with the super glue accelerant. Because it's very hard to be precise, I now resand the edges to try to get everything smoothly aligned. Now I can do a quick fit test. Because the rails are 3mm wide and the tray is 1 centimeter wider than it's needed to be, this leaves 4mm of spare room to account for irregularities. I find this works well, but if needed, you could make some adjustments with your knife to make sure everything fits nicely. You're now on the homeward stretch. I give the trays a spray from a brown spray paint rattle can, which is a color common to all the bases that I use. After this is dry, I follow up by giving it a couple coats of spray varnish to add some durability, and with this, the project is done. I find this method lets me make a decent batch of movement trays for only about 60 to 70 cents a piece, and the total production time, less the paint drying time, is not more than 5 minutes per base. But this can be much faster once you've had an example to trace. Though these movement trays aren't pristine in quality, they look fine, and most importantly, they save me money, so I can now buy new models to add to my pile of inspiration. If you'd like to learn more about painting historical models, please watch this video. If you'd like to learn how to base your models, please watch this video instead. Thanks for watching, and as always, remember to keep building life in miniature.